Jurors and alternates have returned. Mr. Durst is present with Mr. DeGuerin, Mr. Chesnoff, we have Mr. Henderson at council table, and his colleagues hereby. We can resume the recording.
1 hour, 23 minutes, and 1 second.
And if you had asked him and he had refused consent, you would put that in your report, please.
Yes.
Because that has been significant.
Yes.
What else did you do, if anything?
Well, now it's an NYPD case. They've adopted a case.
Okay, so is the answer that you didn't do anything else after that?
At this point, it's been turned over to our BCI, our Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and they've adopted a case.
Well, I'm sorry, maybe I'm confused. I thought you just said that the NYPD, New York Police Department, had taken the case and adopted the case. But you just said that the BCI had adopted the case, which is...
It's both, sir. Both the State Police Bureau of Criminal Investigation had adopted a case, and the NYPD had adopted the case. I generated a File 6 missing persons report directed to the NYPD, sent statewide all points bulletin regarding Mrs. Durst's disappearance. So up to a point, if I can clarify, the New York State Police had a case. At some point, the State Police case is closed. They are now the managing agency.
Do you recall the names of the NYPD other than Strzok or in addition to Strzok that took over the case from you?
If I could refer to the notes here. Actually, it's not, it's in the NYPD report, sir.
NYPD report?
Yes.
Not in one of those reports?
It's not in, I don't believe it's in either one of these.
Okay. So is there any kind of documentation that you are required procedure to create when one agency takes over the case from you? In this case, is there a procedure that you have to go through when you close a case by giving it to the BCI or NYPD, or when they take it over? Is there a procedure?
As a state trooper, I would refer a case to the BCI if it was, and then they would make a determination whether they were going to adopt the case or not.
Well, but we know in this case, and I want to talk about this case now, you've told us that in this case, NYPD had taken over, right?
The NYPD, and again, I'd have to see the NYPD reports, and I really don't want to speak for the NYPD, but we have a procedure in the state police where certain crimes are turned over to the BCI, they're reviewed, and if the BCI determines that they remain with the uniform force, then they come back to the uniform force, albeit the trooper. If they decide to adopt a case, they send a File 20 teletype message, goes to headquarters in Albany, that they've adopted the case.
Okay, was that procedure followed in this case?
Yes, it was.
Where are the documents that show that? I mean, it's not in those two.
I don't believe it's in these two. Again, it would be, I believe it was a report generated by the BCI and so on.
Okay, so your best recollection is that there was a report that was generated by either you or BCI that documents NYPD taking over the case from you. Is that right?
That my recollection is the state police case was closed, NYPD pursued their case.
Okay. Now, I want to make sure that I understand and that the record understands. Is BCI different from NYPD?
Yes.
Okay.
One is state police, one is NYPD.
That's my clarification. BCI is state police, right?
Yes.
And NYPD, of course, is the New York Police Department.
Yes.
Have you seen the document that documents that turning over the case to NYPD?
I've seen the state police document that closes the state police case and refers to the NYPD case.
Where would we find that document?
I don't have it in front of me.
When did you see it?
probably many years ago, but it's available.
It is available.
Yes,
All right. Have you seen it recently?
yes.
When?
I may have seen it yesterday.
Yesterday. We asked that it be turned over to us, Your Honor.
Philly DA base 299-719.
Is it, say that
99719.
again? 997.
You can refer to my copy.
Yeah, approach the business. Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Oh, yeah.
I think so. You mark this as an exhibit?
Yeah, defense exhibit M, it's a 3-page report.
Did we establish, as far as that last exhibit you referred to, was it within the People's Exhibit? Or did that need a separate label? It was actually within the exhibit yet not highlighted. Was that the problem?
No, it's not in the exhibits that are in there.
Not this one, the previous.
Before lunch, too.
That was People's 15 months.
No, not 51 and 52 are in front of him now. It's not among those.
That's not what he's talking about.
I'm just so that we had a correct order. I wanted to know if you'd actually needed the previous one to be labeled as a defense exhibit. If it was within the People's Exhibit.
No, it was within the people's exhibit. The one that we displayed before was in the
Yes.
people's exhibit.
All right, so next in order for the defense is M. Okay, thank you.
I assume that this is the report that you referred to that you've seen recently. I'll show it to you.
Sure.
This is the first page. New York State Police investigation report. It indicates at the bottom, copy 2, trooper copy. I suppose that means you. Is that right?
I don't see, I'm not seeing trooper's copy, sir.
Look at the very bottom. It says troop copies.
Oh, troop copy. Yes, that. So it's a 3 or 4 page.
3 pages. I'm going to show you the other pages.
No, I'm saying with they don't do this anymore.
Carbon copy.
Carbon copies, thank you. So it's maybe a 3 or 4 page carbon copy document. So this page number 1 would be, first copy probably goes to State Police Headquarters. Second copy goes to Troop Headquarters, which is in Poughkeepsie. Third copy would stay at the station.
Well, the question that I really have for you is this. Appear to be the report that you've seen recently within the past few days. That we were talking about that closes the case as far as BCI and your agency is concerned.
Yes, if I can see the rest of this,
Yes,
I believe that's where I'm headed.
Here's the second page, and it starts out about the murder of Najami. Do you need time to read it?
Yeah, please.
Go ahead and read it to yourself.
Okay.
Do you recognize the signature at the bottom?
I can speculate whose signature that is. He's an investigator. There were maybe 4 investigators in the station at the time. It looks like the first letter is B. It might be Investigator Brian Kelly.
I suppose it's not important. You don't recognize it, though.
I don't recognize the signature, sir, but
Right. Here's the third page. The third page is titled. At the top it says it's a continuation sheet with the complainant, Gilberta Najami, and it relates some of the investigation. Paragraph 4. Would you read that to yourself and see if you agree with that? Did you read it?
Yes.
And is this the document that you referred to in my questions a few minutes ago?
Yes.
All right. We're going to move to introduce this document, Your Honor. It's defendant's. Yeah, but the last paragraph, is this the document we're talking about how you close an investigation for the New York State Police?
Yes, this is a continuation sheet which would have been attached to the General 84 investigation report by the Bci. Again, this would have been probably 3 or 4 pages carbon copied. This is a report allowing the Bci to close their investigation.
All right. Would you read into the record that last paragraph? The one that's highlighted. Would you read that last paragraph into the record, please, sir?
Go ahead.
Case closed by investigation as no leads exist in the South Salem or surrounding areas. At present, all aspects of the investigation reflect Mrs. Durst's safe arrival in New York City and subsequent disappearance from that location. File 6 to remain active at the request of the New York City author.
Am I correct that you made copies of the blotter and have kept those copies for 30-some odd years
Yes,
in your own file?
yes, well, not file, just in my possession.
That's all.
All right, thank you. Redirect. Thank you. Mr. DeGuerin, can I see that last one?
Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. You indicated on cross-examination that Mr. Durst did not stop you from searching drawers, from searching the basement, etc. Do you recall that line of questioning?
I recall the questioning as to whether we opened drawers and
On cross-examination, you were asked whether Mr. Durst stopped you, said, hey, don't go in that bedroom, don't look in that basement. Do you recall those questions?
yes,
Okay. Those questions assume that you tried to do those things. My question to you is, did you try to open drawers? Did you try to look in the basement? Did you try to do those things?
I do not recall doing that.
What was your purpose of going there that day? Was your purpose to do a search of the house or to do something else?
The emphasis was on trying to find the whereabouts of Kathleen Durst, first and foremost.
And how are you going to do that? Is that by interviewing Mr. Durst?
He was an individual that one would assume would have probably a lot of information as to her whereabouts.
Okay. You were asked questions about Mr. Burns and your investigation or things you did with respect to Mr. Burns.
Yes,
You indicate you may have spoken to someone at the airlines, is that right?
yes,
You indicate you may, or you did speak with Mr. Burns, is that correct?
yes.
Based on the investigation you did you have any reason to think, after concluding the investigation you did, that Kathie Durst was with Mr. Burns?
No, at the end of that conversation, I did not.
Were you satisfied that she was not with him? As the investigator?
I would say at that point, my emphasis was to speak to Mr. Durst and see what he could report.
Okay. You testified on cross-examination. He sent us in a direction. We followed that direction. Recall that testimony?
Yes.
Who's the he that you're referring to?
I'm sorry, could you just clarify that?
Yes.
You want to respond to the right question?
You testified on cross-examination in response to Mr. DeGuerin's question. He sent us in a direction. We followed that direction.
You mean Mr. Durst?
That's what I'm asking you. Who's
Yes.
the he?
But he is Mr. Durst.
Okay, so you're meaning that Mr. Durst sent you in a direction and you followed that direction. Is that right?
Yes, I think we're talking about the same thing.
Okay, and let me ask you, what direction did Mr. Durst send you in?
Well, he told us he put his wife on the train pulled out.
Okay. And that direction would have been towards New York City, is that right?
That she was on the train 9:18, 9:17, whatever, to New York City.
And he also told you he talked to her later that night in New York City on the telephone, is that right?
That he called her that night at 11:30 p.m.
And the direction that he, being Mr. Durst, sent you in was that, hey, my wife is fine, not fine, but was present in New York City, is that right?
Yes,
And based on that, the case was investigated by Nypd, is that right?
yes,
And based on that, it's your understanding that the BCI eventually closed the investigation in Westchester, in New York State.
yes,
And you were asking questions about, based on your experience at the time, what you would or wouldn't have done or should or shouldn't have done. Recall those questions?
yes,
I want you now to assume the 30 years you have now, 30 plus years now you have this experience in law enforcement, and not the 5 years as a trooper you had at the time, okay? I want you to further assume that the direction he sent you in was that I talked to her on the phone and she's in New York City, okay? I want you to further assume that he later admits that that was a lie. He never actually talked to her on the phone that night. He lied to you about that. I want you to assume he may have an alibi that turned out provably to be false about where he was the night she went missing. Based on your experience now and those facts, would you have recommended to close that investigation, or would you have done something different? Do you remember the question?
I'm sorry, could you repeat it?
When you closed it now, you heard a hypothetical about things that weren't included in the previous questions.
When he told?
And well, I guess I'll let you rephrase. Would you recommend closing it now if you knew these other things that developed later on?
Mr. Durst told you he spoke to her in New York City. You remember that?
Yes,
At the time he told you that, I assume, did you know he was lying about that?
I did not know that.
Had you known he was lying about that fact, would you have done things different?
It would have made a huge difference.
And do you believe the case would have been closed if you'd known that fact?
I'm sorry?
So with your 30 plus years now of experience as a trooper, as well as an investigator, as well as colonel, second in command of 6,000 law enforcement officers of the New York State Police, had you known at the time, and the New York State Police was collectively aware at the time, that he lied to you about talking on the phone in New York City, do you believe that the BCI would close their investigation?
I believe that if he told us, if he lied to us, that case would not have been closed by the state police at that time.
And my last question, you testified that what his demeanor was like when he was discussing his wife was missing, and what his demeanor was like when you informed him, and you asked him questions about Kathie being treated at Jacoby Hospital. Did he appear to be more upset when he was discussing his wife missing, or when you confronted him with the fact that she was treated at Jacoby Hospital?
He was more upset when we discussed Jacoby Hospital.
Okay, I'm not for That's all.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, there are exhibits within. You're going to mark them now?
Yes, Your Honor, I'd like to mark as people 56B. It's a one-page exhibit sheet, which corresponds which exhibits from that conditional examination are now new exhibits. As that sheet details, I'd like to mark People's 56C. That's a 12-page blotter entry. People's 56D.
Excuse me, would you, can you correlate them with the ones that were mentioned?
56C was previous People's 51. Next is 56D, previously People's 52. That's a 3-page report. 56E was previously Defense M, which was a 3-page report.
All right, they may be so marked. Now you have another video.
People's next witness is Detective Michael Struck. The flash drive containing the testimony from that conditional exam we'd like to mark as People's 57. The transcript, we'd like to mark as People's 57A.
All right, you have transcripts to
I'm
distribute.
standing the witness stand.
Okay, you have transcripts for some of us.
Court,
Okay.
get one. Did you get one?
Yeah.
Did you have one?
This is, for the court's information, this is approximately 8 hours and 10 minutes.
All right, both parties had called Detective Struck. This is combined, so both parties had a question. So the format may seem a little different, and the form of the questions may be different, but it's all evidence. It's all treated as you would treat the testimony of any witness.
Will we be getting the transcripts at the end when we deliver it?
All will be available for you when you deliberate. Also, these exhibits will be given to you, so you'll have the actual videotape. We're marking them as exhibits that go to the jury room. And actually, the transcripts are exhibits also. They've been marked as exhibits. For example, this is going to be 50. Here, the flash drive will be 57, and we'll have a means for you to view the flash drive. A clean computer, I believe, is what we'll supply, and then 57A will be the transcript of it. So yes, you will have these things in the jury room. As I've already instructed you, this testimony, you're to treat this testimony the same as you would treat the testimony of a live witness. All right, are you ready? We'll obviously, this will take up the rest of our day today. I'll break at close to 4:30, and then we'll be picking up again tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Are you ready? You may show the video.
I'm standing the witness stand. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly state that the testimony about you given upon something before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated. Sir, can you just move the mic over to the front, please? Please state and spell your first and last name.
Michael Struck, S-T-R-U-K.
Move the chair closer so that you can hear the mic, please. Your first name is Michael.
Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L.
Thank you.
Good morning. Would you state your name to the record and spell it?
That's from that.
Oh, has it?
Yeah. It's for it, yes.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
You retired from the New York Police Department in what year?
1985.
And since that time, you have continued to work in the criminal justice system as a private investigator. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What I'd like to do, before we even get into the facts of this case, Detective Struck, is to get you back. How long, what's your education?
About 3 years in college.
And where were you born and raised?
Born in Brooklyn, New York.
So tell us a little bit about your background. When did you get into police work?
After leaving the Army, I had entered the police department in 1965 and spent 20 years in the Nypd with assignments in patrol, vice and gambling, narcotics for quite a while, and the homicide squad, and as well as general investigation.
When you mentioned that you were in the Army, tell us about your Army experience.
It was a great experience from 1962 to 65.
Where did you serve?
Mainly stateside, the fortunate ones that got out just as the Vietnam War started clipping along.
And tell us about your time in the New York Police Department as a detective, and particularly around 1980, 81, 82.
At a particular time, I was assigned to the 20th Precinct Detective Squad.
What was your particular work? Did you have a specialty, or were you assigned to a particular squad?
No, the format at that point was we had teams that were comprised of 5 to 6 men per team, and most of us were catching general cases. But because of my background coming from the homicide squad at that point, I did become a little bit more involved in the homicide cases, or cases with, I guess you could say, a little bit more notoriety.
And is it different to serve on the missing persons squad than homicide, or is that at that time all rolled into one?
I'd say the missing persons unit is a totally different and distinct unit from our precinct squad setup. They are in another location, actually. At that time, they were assigned to police headquarters in one police plaza.
So a different location altogether from where you were?
That's correct.
Okay. And in front of you, there's a large binder. Of course, you don't have time to read that binder right now, but I want to tell you what's in it, so if you need to refer to it, and I may refer to it from time to time, we'll do that. That binder consists of the initial missing persons report of, in this case, it's Exhibit N. The next section is what we call chronology. Your notes, Exhibit O. Could you open that and take a look at that just for a second?
Which one, N or O?
Oh.
Mr. DeGuerin, are you going to mark this in its entirety, or is there sections that you would wish to mark individually?
Yes, Your Honor, I've marked the sections individually. I put all the sections in one binder. The clerk has a copy of the binder. We've given a copy of the binder to the prosecution, and the witness has that binder. Mr. DeGuerin, our role is Construct
Oh, it's zero. I mean, it's, and
Wait, I'm sorry. Now,
and this is Mr. Proctor. This is a copy of this particular. What I'm going to hand it to you, Detective Struck, should have been under tab O in the book, and we will remedy that in the next recess. But if you'll take a look at that.
So you'll be referring to this as this is now the
And it's a multi-page document, and we refer to it by page numbers time to time. And I realize you sit down before. I realize you don't have time to study that, Detective Schwartz, because that appears to be your handwritten chronology of your activities.
Yes.
In the case.
Yes.
Let's put the first page on the screen so we can all know what we're talking about. And so, the second page, which would be the paper copy in front of you, should be the same as on the screen. And the screen is in front of you to your right.
Okay.
Okay, so tell us what exactly this is. We know that it's your handwriting, correct?
Yes.
And is it notes that you took briefly describing your activities?
Yes, it's a chronology of the case as the case goes forward, and it indicates different things that are done as the case unfolds. More commonly referred to as a log, the folder log or the case log, and the chronology.
Okay, good. We'll be coming back to that as we're going to set that aside. The next thing in the notebook is our Exhibit P, which we designated the struck notebook. This appears to be, the first page of it is on the screen now. It appears to be a spiral notebook.
Correct.
Describe your practice back then. What did you use this for?
Again, it's similar to the chronology that belongs or that's maintained in the case file. It's my personal activity, so to say, in the chronology. Primarily used for quick reference or containing telephone numbers or activities that I'm conducting as the case goes forward. And on many occasions, the follow-up reports or what we call DD5s are generated from some of the things that are contained within my memo book. Memo book is what we call it.
Okay. And do you recognize this particular one?
Yes, this one? Yes, that's mine.
Okay. And of course, it's a copy. It's not the original. We don't. Where do you think the original is?
Right now, I don't know, but perhaps the DA has it. I haven't seen it in a while.
But you recognize this as being an accurate copy as far as you can see?
As far as I can see, yes, sir.
All right. We'll come back to that also. The next exhibit in the notebook is Exhibit Q. Exhibit Q are telephone records, which between the prosecution and the defense in this case, we have a stipulation that they're accurate records and that they comply with the full record keeping predicates for introduction. And so, did you collect telephone records in your investigation?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
It was subpoenaed.
And again, I know that there's not enough time for you to look through these, read them, and tell us that these are the one and the same, but do they appear to be the same records that you collect?
I probably would have to look through that.
Take what time you need to get familiar with it. The first few pages appear to be, well, the first page is appears to be some handwriting by prosecutors here in Los Angeles. And then the next is the letter dated 1982. Regarding the records, and the next is handwritten. So,
It appears to be what we would have gleaned from that subpoena and search warrant, from the subpoena to obtain these.
Executive Director. The next section of the reminder is Exhibit R. Turn to that. And go into the third page of it. What's contained in Exhibit R are reports from the New York State Police Department and their reports. But it also includes your original missing person report, page 3 of Exhibit R. You recognize that?
Yeah, that looks like the scratch copy that the missing persons received from me.
Okay. You use the term scratch copy?
Yeah, when somebody comes in to report a missing person, our SOP at the time was to give the missing persons unit a scratch. We always operated within a 24-hour criteria, where, so to say, for lack of a better term, we didn't send all the troops out until 24 hours elapsed. Because of the amount of people living in New York City, 7-8 million at the time, a lot of people don't come home at night. So it's done to put it in motion, and then typically within 24 hours, missing persons unit, or myself and our teams would then go out on it.
So the scratch report was the initial report?
That's what it looks like, yeah.
And scratch is just
It's my terminology.
your slang terminology.
That's correct. It's the conjoint, I guess you could say.
Okay, and was that used as more or less a screening process?
Well, yes, it's what initiates this particular matter. Yeah.
You mentioned that there are a lot of people that just don't come home one night. Was that to try to give a window of time?
Exactly.
You mentioned, I don't know if you used a number, but you mentioned a number of missing person reports. During that time, how many missing persons reports would you get on a weekly or monthly or yearly basis in New York City?
Well, that's a number that I would only have to speculate, and it's on many occasions it falls within holidays or certain times of the year where people are more likely to vanish for a while or take off on their spouses. So it seemed to run that way. It would trickle in usually, but there are times that you get more so than you would normally.
Okay. If you go into page 6 of the page numbers are on the very bottom of that. That is the first page of what's called New York State Police continuation sheet.
Okay.
It appears to be written by an investigator named Joseph Becerra. His name is up at the upper right hand. It's the first paragraph.
Yes, I see that. Yes.
Okay, are you familiar with that person?
Yes, I am.
And did you provide information to Mr. Becerra years after Kathie
Yes,
Durst's disappearance.
that's correct.
Were you familiar with those reports?
No, I'm not.
Okay. The next exhibit is Exhibit S. We'll turn to that. Is this your original case file, the typewritten reports that you generated?
Well, first I'm looking at what looks like the jacket, copy of the jacket or the folded jacket.
Right.
And
On the screen is Exhibit S, page 1. That's the jacket you're referring to?
yes, it's a typically a blue folder, not so big.
Page 2 looks like the same thing, except it has some additional writing on the agency file. And then, page 3, there's some handwritten notes. Are those your handwritten notes?
It looks like them, yeah.
Okay. Page, the rest of the pages we'll get to in a moment. But generally speaking, if you could thumb through those and see if those appear to be typewritten reports based upon your notebook, based upon your chronology of events.
Yeah, when I'm looking at it, like DD5s, the typewritten version are DD5s that detectives will initiate as a result of certain interviews or anything that's worthy of sending forward.
Okay, you use the term DD5, but Delta 5.
Yeah, that's correct. It's going back to old cop jargon in the police department. It stood for Detective Division 5, and the form hadn't been used 30 years before my time. So it's probably still being used, or at least referred to as a 5, but now it's called something or other. I don't know what the hell it is.
Okay, is it a correct statement that this typewritten version would have its beginning in your activities and would describe what your activities were?
Yes, in reference to usually support notes that are kept with it.
Okay, and so the notebook that we saw earlier, and the chronology that you also had would coincide with these written typewritten reports, is that right?
Normally, yeah.
The next two exhibits are exhibits U and V. Let me ask you, you may not have seen a transcription of the interviews that you did with the producers of the Jeep television show. Have you seen the transcriptions?
No.
For your information, exhibits U and D are transcriptions that were provided to us of the 2 interviews that you did with Mr. Jarecki and Mr. Smarling and his group. Did you agree to an interview in May of 2011 with the makers of what turned out to be the movie series, television series, The Jinx?
Yes, sir.
And did you also interview with the same folks in October 2013?
The date I don't know, sir, unless you show me the document.
Okay, if you'll turn to Exhibit G, it's a transcription. And this you may not recognize because you probably haven't seen a transcription of it. But did you interview in the year 2013 with the makers of the Jinx?
Yes.
Counsel, can we stipulate so it's clear, you put up a transcript of the district attorney's office defense you, it's a transcript dated 5/27/11.
So stipulate
That's the date. The second transcript, which you described as both coming from the district attorney's office, the second transcript is not from the district attorney's office. Second transcript, that is from Hit the Ground Running, and that's the interview 10/16/13. So stipulate here.
Right, so it's the
Thank you.
Okay. Those exhibits are there, Mr. Strike, because I'll be asking you some questions about your opinions of how you were treated by those interviewers in a little while. And you will be free to tell us what you think about that. Exhibit W is a petition filed in court in the Supreme Court of the state of New York that sues the New York City Police Department and mentions you in several places. This is, you may not be familiar with the entire petition, are you?
No.
Are you familiar with the fact that you were mentioned in this petition that was filed in October, just a month ago of this year?
I recall seeing something in the New York paper, I believe, the Post, of accusations that people were making against our squad. Yes, I do.
Against the squad and against you also.
Well, they could accuse me all they want. I'm part of that squad. I take the heat.
The next exhibit is Exhibit X. It's an article from the New York Post, dated October 19th.
In fact, that looks like the photo that accompanied that particular article, mentioning the lawsuit looking for our investigation records, and the photograph was my squad commander and the second whip and a few other detectives from the task force.
The photograph that appeared in the Post is on the screen. Can you identify the 4 members of the police department that are in that photograph?
Sure. On the left is Lieutenant Bob Gibbons, then Sergeant Tom Brady, and I believe that's Detective Kelly and Sullivan from the task force. They had augmented our investigation. We had asked for extra manpower early on, and that's who they are. Lieutenant Gibbons.
You mentioned in your answer that you had asked for extra manpower. Tell us
a little complicated, but after when I was assigned to the homicide squad, I'll use the term disbanded it, but they made it, they broke it down into task force instead. Those of us that were in the homicide squad at that time either opted to stay in local squads if you were close to retirement or whatever. The rest of the guys that had been in homicide squads went into task force. And they would work at a central location, and when we would have, if any particular precinct squad had a case that was more remarkable or very, a lot of notoriety, we would pull from them and they would come down and help us. These are experienced guys, good detectives, and that's what you're looking at here. This is extra help that we had on the case.
And you asked for us extra help, right?
Well, yeah, myself or the squad commander, Bob Gibbons. Sure.
The headline, lawsuit claims NYPD covered up Durst's role in wife's death. Did you do anything to cover up Durst's role, if there was one, in his wife's disappearance or presumed death?
Silly.
I want to give you an opportunity to answer that here in open court and on the record. Did you do your death level best in your investigation?
Yes.
We're going to go over your activities in just a moment. You feel free to comment on your feelings about that headline and the accusation that's in Exhibit W, the petition that we just went over. That's for succinct. And you understand. I'm sorry?
I couldn't think of a better synonym.
Don't blame you at all. And, as I said, I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak your mind on your work on this case. So let's go back and start at the beginning. Probably the easiest way, you tell me, would be to go to your chronology, which is our exhibit. The one that's missing, we have the copy.
Mr. DeGuerin, you've not referred to why the exhibit why. Just to be clear.
Okay, we'll do that. Exhibit Y, let's go to that, it's the last one. You recognize that article?
Yeah.
It quotes you, and in the headline, in fact, it quotes you as saying, the jinx made me look like an idiot, and ex-cop who led the Durst investigation. Did you say that?
Yes.
You gave two lengthy interviews
Yes.
to the producers of the jinx, voluntarily, didn't you?
Yes.
You answered all their questions?
Yes.
Do you think they treated you fairly in the editing process of those interviews?
I could take criticism, and that when it comes to people in being gathered, and I thought that part of it was inappropriate.
I take it you watched the television series Virginia?
Yes, I did.
There's a saying in the movie business and in the television business that it's all in the edit. Do you feel that it was unfairly edited to make you look like an idiot?
I truly don't know if that was by design, but it came out that way, and I didn't think that's something that was that I participated in, thinking it was chronicling Mr. Durst's life or his case or the matter, and allowing stuff to come in from somebody's opinion as to what myself and my brother officers did. It was crazy. I think it didn't commercialize the efforts of that thing, and I thought it had some good stuff in it. But I just thought that was so unnecessary. Nobody knows what we do.
Well, but you know what you did, and that's why we've asked that you be on here so you can tell us what you did. And I want to start at the beginning. For your use, we have the exhibits in front of you that you created yourself. And that would be Exhibit N, the initial missing persons report. Exhibit O, the chronology of dates and times that you did things. Exhibit P, your notebook. If you need to refer to Exhibit Q, the phone records, they're voluminous. Exhibit R, the New York State Police reports. And your original case file, Exhibit S. Those are all here for you in case you need to refer to them, to refresh your recollection or to state what your recollection was then and then you record it. Do you understand where we're going? Do you understand what I'm getting at?
Well, yes, you've explained to me what this contains.
Okay. So let's just start with Exhibit O.
And you want me to go to it?
Yes, sir. On Friday, February the 5th, 1982. February 5th, and we know this is 1982, at 4:30 in the afternoon. Tell us what happened.
Well, I recall Mr. Durst coming into the detective squad. This goes back many years. There's some things that you remember and some things a little more vivid than others. I remember that day. My partners were out, I guess at the time. I think I was the only guy in the detective squad. And I remember he walked in and he had a dog with him. My recollection, he had a dog. I believe I probably sarcastically said to him something like, "Who are you and how the hell did you get up here?" Because he had a dog with him. Normally we'd have people announce who's coming up. The patrol fixing downstairs and so says, anybody being sent up to the squad should be announced. When he walked in, he wasn't announced because he had a dog with him. Although I love dogs.
At any rate, did you take the report from him?
Yes.
And that initial report is marked as Exhibit N. You can see that on the screen. If you turn to it if you want to. Exhibit N, please. It's on the screen now. It's in the book in front of you. It's that the initial report that you took.
It doesn't look like my handwriting.
So,
No, that's from Marshall.
okay. Is that your signature, or is that just assigning it to you at the bottom where it says Detective Michael Struck?
In other words, he's signing that he received it from me.
I see. So who filled out that report?
I guess Marshall.
Okay. Did you yourself fill out a report?
Yes, I did. In fact, that scratch copy we discussed early on.
Okay.
My scratch copy is what permitted him to generate that.
Okay. Well, let's look at, I think that's page 3 of Exhibit R. Let's go to Exhibit R, page 3.
Yes, that's the one that what I refer to as a scratch copy, which would have been called into him, was sent to him.
When you say sent to him, you mean your supervisor?
No, it would have been me. I believe I called, I believe I spoke to Marshall, and he would have generated his report based on what I was giving him. Because like I said, what the standard operating procedure at that time was, I would take the scratch of the squad, we wouldn't do too much, we dumped it on him, and it was it then fell within his domain, so to say, to check with hospitals and morgues and to see if anything fit that description at that point.
Okay, so what's on the screen, which is Exhibit R, page 3, is your scratch report, and the other one that we have marked as Exhibit N is Marshall report. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Nonetheless, you started working on this right away, didn't you?
Yes.
Referring either to your chronology or to your notebook, whichever you're most comfortable with, which you think will be the best to help you accurately testify. The memo book is usually just indicates the event itself. So I spoke to Joe Blow, and if it had a follow-up or a DD5, then it would be in greater detail that way. But on the log and the chronology, that's usually just limited. It just highlights the event itself. All right. So you can use them side by side. Use whatever you need to use to answer the questions, which are basically going to be, what do you do next? After you get this report from Mr. Durst about his likeness, what did you do next? Well, when I look at the chronology of that evening, I see there's a telephone interview with Dr. Cook, Albert Einstein. What did you learn from that interview? I would have to refresh my notes with respect to Dr. Cook. Then there was an interview with Larry Cohen, who was a fellow student at Einstein. An interview with Ann McCormack, the mother of Kathie Durst. And I had several phone calls that I made
spoke with the New York State Police, with Trooper Harney and Sergeant Kidney.
What did you learn from contacting Trooper Harney?
My recollection is that I spoke to Harney and discussed the status of the case at that point, which is a missing person. And I learned from him that he had made a warrantless search for the place that he had entered the house. The conversation was based on whether or not he saw anything remarkable, or anything that was in disarray, or anything that would indicate a crime scene, or something worthy of a crime scene unit response. And he said no, that the place seemed to be in order.
Whether it was correct or not, did you get information from him about when he did that?
Yes.
Was it before, according to the information, whether it's true or not, was it before Mr. Durst said he was reported to you?
No, I believe that it was as a result of my conversation with Trooper. I believe I called up there, or did he call to me? I'm really not sure at this point. I would have to see a further document.
Okay.
But I did speak to him, I think, twice, either him or him and the boss, once each, twice each, or something.
The fact that it's noted in your notebook, your journal, your list of things that you did for February the 5th, shortly after the interview with Mr. Durst, Dr. Cook, Larry Cohen, and McCormack, does that suggest to you that it was relatively soon after you saw Mr. Durst in your office?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, let me put it this way. Was there enough time for Mr. Durst to leave your office in Manhattan and go out to out of town in Westchester County and meet Trooper Harney there?
No, not if my conversation had occurred with Harney for that night. So what Harney is telling me, I believe, is what he did that night. Could it be the day before? I'm not sure. I would have to.
What you listed that you did on February the 5th began in the afternoon at 4:30. What time did you conclude, if you know?
Probably late that night. My shift would have ran till at least 1 o'clock. Our detective chart at that time was 4 p.m. to 1 a.m. So I was probably dogging this until at least 1 o'clock.
Okay, but your information was not that Mr. Durst had, after he talked to you, gone out and met Trooper Harney in Westchester County. That wasn't the information you had, what was it?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes.
Your Honor, it's about 4:30. I paused the video.
Thank you. We'll resume this tomorrow. We'll do our best to be ready at 9 o'clock. Remember, do not talk about the case or about any of the people or any subject involved in it with anyone, including the other jurors. Do not make up your mind about the verdict or any issue until after you've discussed the case with the other jurors during deliberations. And if you've thought about it, don't tweet or Facebook or any social media. Don't even think about that. All right, and we'll see you tomorrow, 9 o'clock. Thank you.